And welcome back, New York fans, to an episode of New York State of Sports here on IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all that is sports. Rick Keeler here with you today for a special episode as we get set for Mets playoff baseball, the drama from yesterday in Atlanta where it looked like the House of Horrors was going to rain down on the Mets again. But this never say die resilient team, which I think exemplifies all of New York sports history this year. Scores 6 in the top of the 8th, gives up 4 in the bottom of the 8th, only to rally again in the 9th, get the win, get the split they need, and now they're in Milwaukee today. Best of 3, all games in Milwaukee, Luis Severino on the mound. What should Mets fans expect today? The wild card roster is out. We are about 5 hours from the first pitch. What are some matchups you need to look at, and what are some stats and trends that could maybe determine tonight's game? What could determine the series as a whole as David Stern, the president, returns to Milwaukee and tries to beat his old team with the moves that he's made? Carlos Mendoza tries to outmanage Pat Murphy. And Milwaukee has secretly been a house of horrors for the Mets over the last recent years, including this season when the Brewers took 2-3 just a week ago. The Mets are back here. We're back for a special playoff preview, and we'll talk Mets in just a minute. And of course, welcome back again to all of our awesome New York, New Jersey fans here on IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all the sports. Rick K here with you. Of course, I want to remind you, as always, follow us on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at IE Sports Radio. In case you missed any of the show or you just want to go back and listen before first pitch, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Spotify, all that fun stuff. Be sure to check that out. Go to our show page, iesportsradio.com/New York State of Sports. You can also follow me on X at Ricanator555 or at NY State Sports IE. That's the show. I was tweeting during the game yesterday. I'm going to try to tweet during the game today and throughout the postseason as much as we can for both the Mets and the Yankees, who begin their run on Saturday. Wild Card Tuesday is today. All 4 series are in action. And during the spring, when the show was on Spreaker, we were trying to do some post games for the Knicks and the Rangers and the Islanders. So we're going to try to do this with StreamYard, see how this works. This is essentially a test run. So if you guys enjoy this and want to see more of it, tweet me, email me, rickjakedealer@gmail.com. I'm always happy to hear from you. So we're going to set the of course, recap yesterday's crazy doubleheader, and we'll look ahead to today. That's what the show is going to be. We're not sure how long we're going to go. But we're going to have some fun along the way. So first, let's hear from our sponsors, Planet Jerky, Seal the Deal Wax Seals, and hear more from the good old Larry B about the network. And we'll be right back in just a minute.
IE Sports Radio fans. This show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, Single A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
Hey there, IE Sports Radio fans. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Seal the Deal Wax Seals by Cecilia B. You just finished your very own wedding or baby shower invitations and you're looking for that extra special touch? Maybe you just wrote a letter to a relative or a friend and you want to add to their smile when they receive it. Then seal the deal with Cecilia's handmade sealing wax stamps for your invitations, letters, and gifts. You bring the deal, we'll bring the seal. You can find them on Instagram at sealthedeal_wax stamps and on Facebook, Seal the Deal Wax Seals.
For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
And of course, thank you to all of our sponsors, Plant Jerky, Seal the Deal Wax Seals, and of course, the great IE Sports Radio. And as Larry mentioned, go to the shop, check out some cool merch. Got a lot of fun stuff going on over on the websites. Be sure to check that out. Again, like and subscribe to not only this video, but to all of the videos here on YouTube. We have so many shows going on Tuesdays. We've got the Northern California show coming up at 2 o'clock, which is going to be a lot of fun. Breaking down those San Francisco 49ers. We've got Tornado Takeover, which is another great show. Talking Oklahoma coming up at 4 o'clock. Yinzer Report with Ralph, who's in the house here at 5. We got the Show of the Land, Gen B talking Cleveland, Buffalo Huddle with Patty, Philly Talk with Crash and Chris, Philly Sports Talk, Neutral Zone, and Sin City Sports with, I'm sure he'll talk Liberty Aces Game 2. So Tuesday is great on the network. I'm at least glad to be joining here on a Tuesday for a little bit, kind of kick off the day. But we got to talk about the Mets. So before we look ahead, let's first look back. And this was an absolute crazy game in Atlanta yesterday. It kind of went the way we thought it would early. Spencer Schwellenbach dominated the Mets for the first 7 innings. The Mets were trying to swing early. It didn't work. Tyler McGill, I thought, did a pretty good job. I mean, outside of the home run he gave to Albies, the 2-run shot in the third, then he gave a home run to Ramon Laureano. He was pretty good. I mean, he did everything you could ask him to, kept in the game, went into the 6th inning, especially when the Mets weren't trying to use a lot of their relievers in case they needed guys in game 2. I thought McGill got out some key jams, got a lot of ground ball outs when he needed to. But the big inning was the 8th inning. Now, Brian Snitker goes to Joe Jimenez, which is the Braves setup man. After Tyrone Taylor puts up a good at-bat, gets a double off of Schwellenbach. Taylor had that infield single in the 3rd, stole a base, kind of tried to get something sparked early, but they couldn't deliver. So Taylor gets the double. That allows... So then after that situation, Francisco Alvarez lines a double down the left field line against Jimenez, and all of a sudden it's 3-1. Barely squeaks by Urshela, who's a very good defensive infielder at 3rd. They bring in Starling Marte to pinch hit. I thought they could have brought in Marte in the 5th inning for Harrison Bader. They elected to do it in the 8th. Marte gets a base hit. Lindor singles up the middle. All of a sudden, it's a 3-2 game. And that's when Snicker has to go to Raisel Iglesias for 6 outs, which we find out the reason for that being is that Chris Sale was scratched for game 2 with back spasms, probably will not pitch in the Braves wildcard series in San Diego. So he's going for the win in this one. But Jose Iglesias gets down 0-2 and then takes a slider into right field. Base hit, ties the game at 3. Mark Vientos puts together a good at bat. He gets a sac fly, makes it a 4-3 game. And then Brandon Nimmo, who you never see bat flip or walk slow or do anything like that, crushes the 2-run homer to the second deck in right and just admires the heck out of it. And that had to be big for Brandon Nimmo because he's had a rough year. Not by his standards. He delivers the home run. All of a sudden, it's 6-3. Mets are feeling good. Looks like they're going to finally exercise the demons. So they bring in Phil Maton after Adam Ottavino did well as Brazoban. But Maton hits Eli White with a pitch. Darno singles 2 batters later. You got 1st and 3rd, 1 out. So Edwin Diaz comes in. Pitched the day before, tries to get 5 outs. He gets a ground out by Urshela. They go to Jared Kelenic, the former Met prospect, to pinch hit. So, of course, there's former Mets all over this game. And Kelenic hits a ball that Pete Alonso makes a hell of a play on just to save a run. But Diaz doesn't cover first. And he's watching Pete make the play, and you're yelling when you look at the replay, like, why aren't you running to the bag? Like, that can't happen. That's a mental error. That cannot happen. Physical errors you can excuse in some way, shape, or form. Mental errors you can't. So that doesn't work. And you can tell that messed with Diaz's head. Walks Michael Harris on 4 pitches. Ozzie Albies gets a 3-1 count and then hits a double off the wall and left, clears the bases. All of a sudden, the Braves lead 7-6. And you Met fans out there are thinking, doom and gloom, this can't happen. You're not going to make the playoffs. That's it. It's over. But the Braves don't have Iglesias. Remember, they pulled him in the top of the 8th inning for Aaron Bummer. So Snicker has to go to Pierce Johnson. Marte gets a base hit, and then Lindor hits a ball. It doesn't look like it's going out, and it just keeps carrying and carrying and carrying, and it's out. 33rd of the year, an 8-7 game, and you got to look at Lindor, and to me, if he's not the MVP of the National League, which he's not going to be, Ohtani's going to get it for the 50-50 performance. He's the heart and soul of this group. I mean, you could tell this team had a different jolt Friday when he came back from the back injury. And you can tell he's not playing 100%. That back's got to be killing him. But what's left of that back is carrying this Mets team. And that was an incredible hit. And this is a guy that since May has been one of the best hitters in baseball. You can't ask him anything else. He's earned every dollar of that contract. So he hits the home run, makes it 8-7. And what Mendoza does is he elects to leave Diaz out there. And Diaz even told him, like, I want in on this. I want to finish this. Because Ryan Stanek was warming up. And I'm thinking at home, like, do you go to Jose Buto? Do you go to Sean Manaea? Do you try to do something different to try to end this game just to clinch the playoff spot? White singles, steals second because everyone steals and Edwin Diaz. And it comes down to Travis d'Arnaud. Of course, it comes down to d'Arnaud, who had the walk-off on Saturday, which helped the Braves get in. It ended up helping the Braves get in. And d'Arnaud grounds out. Mets get the win. Jubilation galore. And it caps a great year for, at least in my mind, for both Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns. Now, Mendoza, a lot of people had questions on coming over from the Yankees, first-year manager, not a lot of experience. And for him to kind of push the right buttons, whether it was putting Lindor in the leadoff spot, whether it was the bullpen moves and trusting guys to finish off games. He's not a guy that's really going to lean too much in the analytics. I mean, yesterday, the analytics would have told you take Diaz out of the game. But if you're going to lose, and you're going to lose at a playoff spot, I'd rather lose with my best guy than lose with Ryan Stanek. But the players seem to have trust in him, and he trusts his players. And that's kind of what Aaron Boone does with the Yankees. Partially why some Yankee fans don't like Aaron Boone. But Mendoza's a different type of manager that has earned this opportunity, and he has been able to steady his ship. Remember, the Mets were 0-5 to begin the year. They almost got no hit in the game that they got the win, which was their first against Detroit. They were 10 games under 500. They had a player throw their glove in the stands during a game in the homestand from hell against the Dodgers. They had a weird split in London where they won that crazy game against the Phillies. And they also had those crazy games in the West Coast in August where they lost the game in Arizona on a grand slam by Corbin Carroll. They lost the game late against San Diego. And they just keep fighting. They just keep fighting. They had a rough week last week, but they only won one game, and that was the Sunday game. But they keep fighting. And you have to tip your cap to that. And you look at David Stearns, the moves he's made. Tyrone Taylor's worked. Harrison Bader, at least defensively, I would say has somewhat worked. He's limited offensively, but that is what it is. Bring in Severino. Bring in Manaea. And the move even to call up Acuna with a couple weeks left in the year has ended up being a spark plug for the Mets and doing some good things. The Jesse Winker trade, I'm not sure if that's where, because Winker's been struggling, but he had some big hits in August that helped this team. The bullpen moves at the deadline, bring in Naton, bring in Stanek. They didn't make that big closer move or a big reliever move, but they made small moves, and that's what David Stearns is kind of known for. And really, outside of Adrian Hauser, what the Mets did this winter after getting rid of Scherzer and Verlander and kind of basically making a team like this was a bridge, but the Mets all along said this was a playoff team, and people laughed at them, myself included, thinking that they were the Diamondbacks. And I don't think they're going to be the Diamondbacks were last year, but they made the playoffs for the first time since 2022. And that 2022 team was different because they were expected to get there with Buck Showalter. This team was not. So however this season ends, just a congratulations to both Mendoza and Stearns out of this Mets organization, because they've taken the long route, and so far the long route has worked, and they haven't tried to make any rash moves after disappointment a year ago. And that alone is a good thing. So we're going to take our first break. We'll come back. We're going to take a look next at this matchup with the Brewers. We'll look at tonight's pitching matchup and kind of give you everything to expect from this game and some interesting stats I was looking up this morning that I think could play a factor tonight. You're listening to New York State Sports, a special Mets-Brewers playoff episode on IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all those sports. We will be right back in just a minute.
What's up, sports fans? You're listening to IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'm your favorite West Coast Wisconsinite, Bernie Bango, and if you're a cheesehead, come listen to my show, Big Cheese Sports, where we road trip around America's Dairyland, previewing, reviewing, predicting, debating, and digging into all that is Wisconsin sports at the college and pro levels. Join me on IE Sports Radio, Sundays at 1 p.m. Central Standard. Bernie out.
Everybody, this is Taryn Rodriguez. Are you a fan of volleyball? Are you a fan of Thunderous Spikes? Then I have the show for you, Set Point, where I cover NCAA men's and women's volleyball, high school boys and girls volleyball, beach volleyball, and even professional volleyball. Catch the action every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And of course, congratulations to Taryn Rodriguez on a milestone episode last night of Set Point. I mean, he's the volleyball expert here. I don't know anybody who's more qualified to talk volleyball than Taryn is on this network. And that's the kind of shows you get here. So I wanted to send him a nice congrats. Welcome back. Mets-Brewers wildcard preview here on New York State Sports, IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. The matchup is set. Mets and Brewers. Of course, the Brewers took 5 out of 6 games against the Mets this year, including 2 out of 3 last week. They played in the season opener, so it's really tough to kind of go the first series and the last series, but that's the way these two teams did it. Now, the wild card rosters were announced by both teams, You have to get your wild card roster. I think it's 6 hours before first pitch. And they were announced, I think, over the last hour or so. For the Brewers, Sal Frelick is on the roster, and I think it's going to help them in the outfield for sure. Along with Jackson Churio, Garrett Mitchell. They have a lot of good young outfielders. So that's really the one surprise thing for Milwaukee. Of course, former Met Gary Sanchez is on the roster as one of the 3 catchers. But the big surprise, there's a couple on the Mets side. Jesse Winker makes the wild card roster, and he's a guy that's battling some back issues, not hitting the ball well, but the Mets must seem to think that Jesse Winker is going to give them something in this postseason. So he's up as one of the 5 outfielders. In terms of the pitching staff, the big surprise is Max Kranick. Now, you might be asking, who is Max Kranick? Max Kranick was competing for a bullpen job in spring training, hurt his hamstring. He has spent all season in the minor leagues for the Mets. So he gets a call, grew up a Mets fan, great story. But at the same time, you look at this Met bullpen, you're not going to see Tyler McGill, who pitched yesterday. And maybe it makes sense. McGill threw almost, think about 90 pitches yesterday. So could he really give you anything out of the bullpen in this series? Probably not, although he would have been a good weapon to have. And I think in the DS, if the Mets make it to that point, he will be good there. But you're looking at a night tonight where you don't have Edwin Diaz because he's pitched back-to-back days and thrown like 60 pitches. You don't have Phil Maton, who's pitched 3 days in a row. So he's not going to throw. So essentially, tonight your bullpen's going to be a little bit interesting because Brazovan threw both games of the doubleheader. Could he really give you anything today? So really, it's like 10 guys. Reed Garrett, Ottavino, Stanek. And I think tonight the bridge is going to go through Jose Butto. I would think they could maybe get the save if the Mets need it. If they're in that opportunity, could you go, since probably you would think Quintana's going to throw game 3, could you go David Peterson to close? Even though he threw on Sunday? There's so many different things that the Mets have to worry about. So Kranick makes the roster. It's a surprise. It's a good story, but it's kind of come out of left field in this one. So we'll wait to see what Mendoza and Stern say about that a little bit later. I don't think they speak until around like 2 o'clock or 2:30. So we'll monitor that throughout the day. But some interesting things, at least on the Brewers side, to keep an eye on before we dive into the pitching matchup. Rhys Hoskins has been a thorn in the Mets side ever since he's been with the Phillies. We all remember the feud he had with Jeff McNeil earlier in the year on that slide. Hoskins has 8 RBIs against the Mets. He had the grand slam off Manaea on Friday. So I think he's going to be a thorn in their side in this series. And Milwaukee loves to run. This is a really fast team. This year against the Mets in 6 games, they stole 17 bases. So they're going to be a threat, constantly running around. That's where the running game with both Alvarez and even if they bring in Luis Torrens. That's another move we didn't talk about that Mendoza and Stearns did well with. Torrens, I covered. He was in the Yankee system many years ago. And this is a guy who's gone around the league, played for the Mariners, been with some major league clubs. And he controlled the running and did a good job while Alvarez was out. So they're going to need to throw out some base runners in this series because the Brewers can steal some out. That's a team that can steal runs with the way that they move around the bases. In a best of 3, you have to look at every detail and every angle because anything could decide a series, especially when you get to the playoffs and things bump up in magnitude just a little bit. On the Mets side, there's not much they can go off with the Brewers. Francisco Alvarez had some good numbers, 7 for 15, a home run, 4 RBIs. Iglesias is 5 for 11, but some Mets have had some awful numbers. Pete Alonso, 5 for 21. Brandon Nimmo, 3 for 27. This is not a good matchup for the Mets on paper. Now, I think from a logistical standpoint, it is. Because I'd rather take the flight to Milwaukee last night than take the flight to San Diego. I think that was big. The Mets, in all likelihood, the best thing for them was to not win yesterday in game 2. But I got to tip my cap to Joey Lucchesi, who was absolutely fantastic. 110 pitches. This is a pitcher that hadn't really started a game. Hadn't pitched, at least in the starting role, since July in AAA. But he's a major league pitcher. And he came up and really kept the Braves in check. It was like 1 run over 6. And a game the Braves had to have. So props to Joey Lucchesi. That's a yeoman's effort, and I think he got an OMG celebration as well. That's usually reserved for home runs, but he got one, and he absolutely deserved it. So your pitching matchup tonight, 5:30 ESPN2. I believe it's John Boog and Doug Glanville on the call. Luis Severino for the Mets and Freddie Peralta for the Brewers. Peralta being their ace. Remember, this is the Brewers pitching staff that Corbin Burns got traded in the offseason. Brandon Woodruff not healthy enough to pitch this year. So there's so many different wrinkles for this Brewer team. It's how to use openers a lot of the time. And they've been able to find ways to get things done. But Peralta's been their ace. So let's talk Severino first. He's faced the Brewers this year in the second game of the season, went 5 innings, allowed 3 earned runs, 6 runs total. Mets were a little sloppy in the field that day. 11 hits, though, which I think is eye-opening. Struck out 6. Now, over the last 14 innings, that's 3 starts. He's given up 10 runs, but 4 home runs. And you look at the postseason, usually the team that hits the most home runs in a game wins. It's weird because we've had teams that steal a lot of bases that end up winning these games. At least in the regular season, we've had the most stolen bases that we've had in a long time because of the new rules. But we try to get this all-around game, but usually being home run or strikeout. So I'd be a little bit concerned for a guy like Severino if he leaves the fastball up and leaves it up to the wrong player. That 2 or 3 run homer could be the difference in a game. What's also concerning to me on Severino is tonight's his 11th postseason start, going back, of course, with the Yankees, and he's pitched some big games. Everybody remembers his first postseason game, which was the Twins game, where he only got 1 out in the wild card game. He has only gone past 5 innings in 3 of those starts, and tonight the Mets need him to get through 5 because of their compromised bullpen. In his career, he's got a 5.15 ERA in the playoffs. So that's largely inflated with the bad start against the Twins. He did have 2 games in 22 in the postseason and did okay. He's a guy that lives for the big game. Of course, everyone remembers the Red Sox game years back when he forgot what time the game was and didn't really get his warm-ups in on time, or his tipping pitches or whatever it is. And he's had his weird quirks with the Yankees. But he's a guy that's pitched on this stage before. And I think for the Mets to have that opportunity to at least give him the ball, he's got an extra day's rest, which helps him. I don't expect a bad game, but I think right now I don't expect Severino to keep them in the game. I think that's the goal tonight. I'm not going to go out there and think he's going to strike out 10 or have an ace-like performance. But he's got to set the tone. Like if the Mets can get an early lead, set the tone, get some shutdown innings, keep the momentum from yesterday going in the right direction. Now we talk about Freddie Peralta on the other side, who's really predominantly known for his fastball. Peralta faced the Mets back on March 29th. The only hit he gave up was a Starling Marte home run. He went 6 innings, struck out 8, walked the batter. Brewers won 3-1. There are a couple of things to keep an eye with Peralta. Now, there's good and there's bad. Let's start with the good for at least the Brewers side. Peralta hasn't allowed more than 3 runs in a game this season since August 12th. That's a span, again, of almost about a month and a half. So Peralta's been consistent. But he's been consistent another way. He has walked at least 2 batters in 13 straight outings. 2 walks or more, 13 straight outings. So the Mets are going to get their chances in this game. If that trend continues, you're going to get an inning where you have 2 men on base or first and third with 1 out or something like that. When you get those chances in the playoffs, you've got to capitalize on them. So I don't think Peralta, as much as he dominated Mets in the first game, I think the Mets are going to have their chances. Even against Schwellenbach yesterday, they had a couple opportunities. So take advantage of those early chances and keep that vibe going. Peralta in 4 appearances, a 3.46 ERA in the playoffs. Now he's made 2 starts. The team is 0-4 in those games. So that to me is going to be the interesting thing. Peralta pitched last year and the Brewers got swept by the Diamondbacks in that best of 3 at home. And that's why I think the pressure to me is on the Brewers in this series. Even though that Pat Murphy is probably going to win Manager of the Year, the Brewers, you look at the division they were in the NL Central, they dominated that division. They weren't challenged in that division. Like if you go up and down the line and you look at really what the Brewers did outside of the division, that would be something I would really want to take a look at because, they weren't really challenged at the end of the year. St. Louis didn't push them. The Cubs didn't push them. The Pirates didn't push them. Cincinnati, of course, fires their manager. That to me is a little more eye-opening. Like the Brewers were 93-69 on the season. 47-30. Like their home record splits are actually pretty good. But you look at their record, they're 52-41 against teams above 500. So that's actually pretty good. I will give them that much. But the Brewers against the Central were 32-20. They went 500 against the East. Now, a bulk of that was against the Mets. Four games under against the West. Now, that also includes AL East teams. Brewers had their fair share of those games. But 15-15 against East opponents. So at least you can see the Brewers getting that step up in class here, and I think that's going to be interesting to see what happens. Because the Mets are going to come in, they're probably running on adrenaline, and usually the first game is the easiest one to get when you come off these short flights and things like that, because your body's not settled in, your body's not adjusted to anything yet. Like if the Mets don't win tonight, I'd be a little more concerned with game 2 with all those things clicking in. Now, neither team has announced starters for games 2 and game 3 as of right now. I think on the Mets side, you would lean towards Sean Manaea. And then game 3, if there is a game 3, depending on how things go, let's say things go normal, I would think Jose Quintana would get the ball. Reason being, I think you're going to get more swing and miss from Peterson out of the bullpen, even though Peterson just shut down this lineup Sunday, went 7 scoreless, had one of his best outings of his career. But I don't know what Quintana gives you out of the bullpen. I know what Peterson can kind of give you, and maybe Peterson comes in and gets a couple of big outs. Like we saw it in 22. Peterson came out of the bullpen, I think it was game 2 against the Padres, and actually did pretty well. So he's been used to that. Now, the one thing you could say is, okay, Mets get by, and Peterson's not available to pitch game 1 of a DS on Saturday. Well, that is what it is. You got to get – it's all about surviving and advancing and then figuring out what you do the next day. Tyler McGill's wife actually tweeted a little while ago, said McGill's with the team, can be added. He couldn't pitch in 3 days anyway. So there's no injury with Tyler McGill. It's strictly just a regular season base. It's more just he's not a fresh arm. And right now the Mets, I think, are in more need of fresh arms than they are necessarily taking the best pitchers on the roster. I guess that's what the Mets depth is, because Kranick was not great. Hartwig would be an option. I don't really know where else they could have gone pitching wise. But that to me is going to be interesting to see what they decide to do. So we're going to take one more quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk X factors for this series and this game tonight. And I'll make a little prediction on this one, and we'll look at the other four games as well. I think they're also the other 3 games. I think they're pretty intriguing. Give you my thoughts on those. Listening to New York State Sports, 90 Sports Radio, direct feed for all the sports. We'll be right back in just a minute.
What's good, everyone? It's Drewski, the host of Heart of Texas Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. On this station, we cover everything in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. From where we cover the Dallas Cowboys, the Dallas Stars, Dallas Mavericks, Dallas Wings, Texas Rangers, TCU, SMU, we cover it all right here every Wednesdays from 9 to 10 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you stay live with me on the Heart of Texas Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, Pittsburgh? This is Ralph DeLeese, the host of the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Are you that passionate diehard Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, or just a Pittsburgh sports fan? Then please join me on the Injury Report every Tuesday on IE Sports Radio, the direct feed for all that is sports. And I will update you on all that's black and gold and have you telling your Pittsburgh fans and friends what's up with Pittsburgh sports. Tune in Tuesday with me, Ralph DeLeese, the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Let's go!
Welcome back to the final segment here on our Mets-Brewers Wildcard Gate Preview Show. We're looking mainly at Game 1. Again, we're going to see how many of these we can do over the course of this postseason, Mets and Yankees-wise. Some might be here on StreamYard Live. Others, depending on show schedules, things like that, we may just do recording, StreamYard, Spreaker, all these things. Stay tuned, of course, to our social media accounts to get an idea of when we'll do those at NY State Sports IE. Or just tweet me at Rickinator555. If you have a question or a comment during the game or after the game, feel free to tweet me or email me, rickjkeeler@gmail.com. I am happy to hear from you. So let's look at some X factors for this series as we wrap up the show. For the Brewers, I'm going with their bullpen, and in particular, Jared Koenig. Jared Koenig has been really good for this team. He's been used as openers. He's been used as closer options, especially Devin Williams missed a decent portion of the season to begin the year. Remember, they lost Josh Hader a couple of years ago. David Stearns traded him away. But the Brewers always seem to find good relievers. And their bullpen was really good this year. They had the best ERA in the National League, 3.11, second best in all of baseball. In terms of strikeouts, they were sixth, 600 with 638. The Mets were fifth with 648. So both these bullpens, some good strikeouts. Brewers had the third lowest average against at 221. Mets were at about 223. In terms of home runs allowed, the Brewers were 11th at 72. The Mets allowed 62. The Brewers bullpen allowed a few more home runs, but Jared Koenig, to me, is going to be interesting to see how he's deployed by Murphy in this series. They also have a decent amount of left-handers in their bullpen, which is going to be helpful. The other guy would be, if you go for the familial route, Tyler's brother is on the Brewers, Trevor McGill. Trevor McGill had like a 1 ERA in September. So he's coming in pitching pretty well. So this Brewers team is going to get creative with the way they pitch. It's not surprising that would happen. So could we see Koenig in the sixth inning? Could we see, again, a lot is going to be different based on these matchups. I think it just depends on maybe lane of the game. Like you could see Diaz in game 2 against the top of the lineup, because that's the point in the game. You got to get the outs. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to look at the ninth inning and make this different. On the Mets side, there's a lot of options I could have gone with. We've talked about Alvarez already and how big of a game changer he could be. We talked about, obviously, Lindor, Nimmo, Alonso. I'm going to go with Mark Vientos. And I'm going to go Mark Vientos because I think he's a player that could really make an impact for this group. Remember, he got a late start to the year and like about May, and I think people are always waiting for him to break out. I think that's been one of the fun surprises of this year, is the fact that he's been able to flourish at their base. His defense hasn't cost the team in any way, shape, or form. He's hit for power. He had the big at-bat yesterday. We talked about the sacrifice fly, not trying to do too much in that situation, just getting the ball in the air and allowing Lindor to score. I mean, that's a big deal. So I think looking at Vientos, especially where he hits in the lineup, he usually hits in the number 3 spot. That's going to be something to consider, that he can make an impact in some way, especially at the top of the lineup. We've seen it. Jose Iglesias used to be another one. The guy's got a 21-game hitting streak, which is crazy. I mean, he's been kind of the catalyst behind this thing, but he has been. Remember, Iglesias wasn't always known for his offense. He was always known more for his defense, whether it was the Tigers, Red Sox, wherever it was. And he has been a contact hitting machine. So when you look at that top three yesterday of Lindor, Iglesias, and Vientos, it's a good 1-2-3. It's an unorthodox 1-2-3 based usually you look at a team across town like the Yankees with Torres, Soto, and Judge. But the Mets find a way to get it done. So Vientos to me would be my X factor. Looking ahead for the Brewers in this series, you're probably going to see like a Frankie Montas in game 2, and Montas pitched well against the Mets the other day. That's a player that we've seen in postseasons past can make an impact. Another one be interested to see is how they use their rookie, Tobias Myers. Myers is really good for this team. Aaron Savali would be another guy. So this Brewers playoff roster is, to me, going to be interesting to see how Murphy deploys these guys over the course of these 3 games, because there's not necessarily the right way to go about it, because it really just comes down to what the Brewers want to do. Like, they've got Myers ready. They've got Peralta. They've got Montas. They've got Savali. Aaron Ashby's another guy. Now, the only surprise Milwaukee had on their roster necessarily, I mean, Frelick had the hit, but the other guy was Nick Mears, who was just activated off their injured list. Brian Hudson, not on the roster. But they do have abundance of lefties, so that was, again, their controversial moves, if anything. So if I'm asking for a pick in this series, I'm going to take the Brewers in 3. I think the Mets have a good chance. Don't get me wrong. I think this is the best matchup they could have had. I think San Diego would have wiped the floor with them, especially with the pitching they have. It looks like San Diego's going with King, Musgrove, and Cease in these games, and I don't think the Mets would do well against that pitching staff. Brewers at least give the Mets a lane to get through, but I think Milwaukee's bullpen, I think just the Mets being a little bit compromised tonight with their bullpen situation, and then having to turn the page to Manaea. We don't know what Sean Manaea we're going to get in game 2. Is it the second half Manaea that was dominant and was one of the best pitchers in baseball? Or was it the case in which you saw Friday where Hoskins hits the grand slam and Manaea can't get out of the 3rd inning? Like, we've seen Mendoza manage these games differently in September. We've seen him pull Peterson after the 4th inning in September against the Phillies. Like, he'll manage these games like playoff games, as he should. But how did the chess match between Mendoza and Murphy is going to be fun. Now, in terms of the other 3 games today, Tigers-Astros kick it off in about an hour at 2:30. Skubal against Valdez, that's going to be fun. Jordan Alvarez is in the lineup for Houston, but how healthy is he? Of course, we'd all love to see A.J. Hinch get revenge on the Astros. Yankee fans would love that, especially. Tigers, though, outside of Skubal, don't have a lot of reliever options. I think Houston is more vulnerable in a best of 7 than in a best of 3, because they can just throw Valdez. Arrieta's been good. And I think this Astro team just knows how to win. So I'm going to take Houston in that series. Royals and Orioles, we talked about it yesterday. Vinny Pasquantino is in the lineup for Kansas City. It is Reagans against Burns today. Orioles need a big one from Burns. And remember, Burns wasn't good in last year's playoffs for the Brewers, so he needs to step up and have a really big performance. That's why Baltimore traded the guys they did for him. I'm going to go with the Orioles. I'm not confident in it. I just think Kansas City's lineup is way too inconsistent. And I think Baltimore's lineup has more non-easy outs in it. And how effective is Pasquantino? Is the boost of him in the lineup enough to get KC through? I'm not sure. So I'm going to go Baltimore. And Padres, I'm going to take a sweep over the Braves. Chris Sale's not on the roster. They don't know who they're starting in game 1. It could be Bryce Elder, could be Smith Schuster, could be Ian Anderson, who hasn't pitched in the majors in a while. So they're compromised. I think the Braves did a good job just to get in the playoffs. Padres are well rested. They could really make the World Series. That's how good this team is. If the Mets do advance past the Brewers, they would play the Phillies. And I think they'd match up decently with the Phillies. We just saw them play them 7 times in September, and really the Mets should have won 5 of those. So I think the matchup, the lane to an NLCS with going Milwaukee to Philly is easier than San Diego to LA, because of travel and things like that. So Again, game one tonight. We talked about it at length. 5:30 ESPN2, Severino against Peralta. It should be a fun one for sure. So again, I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in to this special game one Mets-Brewers wild card preview show. Again, congratulations to the Mets. Just even getting to this point is an accomplishment in and of itself. They should be proud. Their fans should be proud. And it shows you, it's kind of the thing with the Mets when they're not expected to do something, they find a way to achieve more than they need than they're expecting. And when they have the expectations that they did last year, they fall flat on their face. I don't think that they're expected to do much in this series. Milwaukee's the favorite. It's a slight favorite. I don't think anybody will be surprised if the Mets won this series, but how the key is going to be tonight. If they can win this game without using Diaz, without using Phil Maton, and get up 1-0 and have Diaz the next two nights, then I think they win this series. If the Mets don't win game one, I think they're in trouble. But I do think they get a win in the series at some point. I just think Milwaukee is a better all-around team. And I think they can win in different ways, even without Christian Yelich, who they haven't had throughout the course of the second half. Contreras, of course, him playing Narco is going to make the fans angry as it usually does. But this should be fun. So we'll see what the rest of the playoffs have in store for these shows. We definitely want to do one when the Yankees know their opponents, so we can kind of get into that. Will we do a post game? Again, stay tuned for that. That would be the next morning, probably. So we will do those. But thanks again for tuning in. Enjoy the baseball today. Enjoy all the shows on IE Sports Radio today. So many coming up over the next 8 or 9 hours. Just stay here on YouTube when you get alerts about what's coming up next. So from all of us here at IE Sports Radio, this is Ricky K saying so long for your clear sports. Enjoy game one tonight. And see you next time.